You're listening to The Pain Chaser 1, Ambuscade. This audiobook contains violence, torture, drug use, and scenes of a graphic and often disturbing sexual nature. It should go without saying that it is not intended for children. Now turn up the sound, turn down the lights, and find a comfortable place to hide. Because fear has a face, and I'm going to show it to you. Chapter 3. In the ruins of what used to be St. Luke's Medical in downtown Kettle Creek, but now served as the meeting place for the group known to themselves as the Morsus Labari, men and women gathered like a pack of dogs to a carcass. The group sat quietly, in full ceremonial garb, in a loose semicircle as if seated at an imaginary table. At its head was a middle-aged man with a wide snake-like mouth. His receding shoulder-length white hair was pulled back into a ponytail that disappeared behind the hood of his ceremonial cloak. Seated at his left was a beautiful young woman with hair bleached so blonde it was the color of silver. Piercings ran the length of each ear, and a thin silver chain swung from the tip of the left to a hoop in her left nostril. Her arms, which were bare, as she was the only one there in a dress rather than ceremonial clothing, were each sleeved in tattoos, depicting depraved sexual acts and violence. Between the four fingers of each hand, she balanced a wicked-looking surgical steel knife with a 5-inch long blade. The group sat abnormally still and quiet, each looking at the tall man seated at their head. As footsteps could be heard coming down a nearby stairwell, he raised one long and bony hand into the air. "They come," he said. His voice was sharp and deeply accented, his native French bleeding into an otherwise perfect English. Two cloaked men entered the room, each flanking and very nearly carrying a third. They let their prisoner slump to his knees as they reached the center of the room and bowed. The prisoner looked up at the congregation with terror in his eyes. Blood streaked his face from a nasty wound at his temple, and when he spoke, many broken or missing teeth shone through his split lips. "Please, I didn't do anything. I didn't. Please just let me go." "We? Of course you didn't do anything, Monsieur Jonas. We caught up with you before you could, no?" The Frenchman was getting to his feet and pacing in front of the man he called Jonas. He turned to one of the cloaked men that accompanied the prisoner. "The papers found with him, s'il vous plaît." The cloaked man produced a thin folder full of photocopies from an inside pocket. "Merci," said the Frenchman, opening the folder and thumbing through the documents it contained. "Imagine our shock, Monsieur Jonas, when on this very same morning that our chief engineer went missing, we also found that a number of our most important documents were out of place. You gave us quite the chase, mon ami, quite the chase." The Frenchman threw a packet of documents down on the kneeling man's face. "The results of all of our research over the past 30 years. He threw more papers in the man's face. "Deeds to all of our properties." He threw the remainder of the folder, the papers fluttering up and around the condemned man's shoulder. The Frenchman's voice took on an edge of malice. "Our most precious religious texts." Tears streamed down Jonas's face, leaving fresh trails in the dried blood. "I wasn't going to use them, I swear. I only made these copies as insurance. I just want it out," he pleaded, his voice cracking with every word. The Frenchman chuckled, pacing back with his arms crossed behind his back. "Out? No. There is no out in the Morsus Labari. Once you have joined our circle, you cannot simply walk away. Once you have tasted of our pleasures, you may never return to the pathetic flock that bore you. Comprendez-vous, Monsieur Jonas? What? Jonas asked miserably. Do you understand, you worthless piece of pig shit? The Frenchman roared in his face. Yes, yes. Jonas sobbed, lowering his head. I understand. I'm sorry. Oh, well, that is all I wanted to hear, Monsieur Jonas. If you are truly sorry, then all is forgiven. What? Asked Jonas unbelievingly. Oh, oui. Forgiveness is a simple thing. Now trust, that is a different story altogether. I am afraid the congregation can no longer trust you with our secrets, monsieur. I'll never do it again, Jonas whined. I swear. The Frenchman mocked a sad look and nodded. Oui. I wish I could believe you, Monsieur Jonas, but as you demonstrated here tonight, your word is no longer any good with us. I'm afraid we simply cannot let you go free. Are you going to kill me? Jonas asked. No, of course I'm not going to kill you, Monsieur Jonas. What kind of monster do you take me to be? He smiled that long, thin, snake smile. We will simply find another way for you to serve our master. He turned to the beautiful blonde. Shana, if you will? A wicked grin split her face, defiling otherwise gorgeous features as she stood. She wore a crimson dress split all the way down her back and hanging loosely on her slender white shoulders. Lining her back on either side of her spine were a series of implanted rings, tied tightly in the manner of a corset, the blood-red bow sitting just over her perfectly crafted ass. She spun the knife loosely in her palm as she slinked over to stand beside the Frenchman, grinning wide to show a mouthful of small, pointed teeth. She knelt before the struggling Jonas as he tried to pull away. But as he scrambled, his two hooded jailers grabbed him by the arms and held him fast. The beautiful monster straddled him, hands exploring his neck and face, slowly, almost lovingly. No! No! He protested as one of her slender hands entwined itself into his hair to keep his head still, as the other slowly inserted the knife into his mouth. He inhaled sharply, tasting metal and blood. She drew the blade back toward him, slicing the skin of his left cheek in a long, straight tear that ran all the way to the ear. He screamed. Blood trickled from the fresh wound, down his cheek and neck, dyeing his shirt deep red. She dipped her flawless fingers into the steady flow, like a child playing in water, smearing the red across his skin and hers. Then the knife moved, and she slit the other cheek, giving him the perpetual grin of an insane clown. She reached into the screaming man's all-too-wide mouth, grabbed a hold of his tongue, and pulled. The knife came down again. This time, it separated a good 4 inches of the twisting muscle. He made choking, gurgling noises deep in his throat as he tried to draw air to scream, stifled by his own blood. She held the tongue up in front of her eyes, looking at it wonderingly before throwing it down with a bloody splat to the concrete floor and continuing her work. The Frenchman turned to address the rest of the congregation, ignoring the muffled screams behind him. Let the rest of us learn from Monsieur Jonas's gruesome example. We have taken a sacred oath to the order of the Morsis Liberi. That oath is not something that can be taken lightly. For those willing to make the sacrifice and show their undying allegiance to the order, the rewards are considerable. To those who would betray us, well, he held a hand out to signify Jonas's blood-soaked, convulsing form on the ground. The Frenchman turned to Shayna, who was now in the process of teasing the eyes from Jonas's sockets with the tip of her knife blade.